Maybe at this point, Nick, talk about we can talk about the different kinds of books in the New Testament. So what are like some of like the main genres and themes when looking at like these 27 books that make up our New Testament?
Yeah, so you've got what's called the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they are basically what you call, and I think like Mike Licona is probably right, although I'm not sure how far I would go as far as him, but essentially they're historiography, they're ancient biographies, and they are written in the sense of how a first century author would write them. They're not writing like Stephen King or whoever writes history these days. They're not writing like Howard Zinn or whoever. And so, but they are intended to be historical documents that are making theological points, but because the entire subject is theological. It's like you can't talk about Jesus without doing theology. That's just how it goes. Then you have the other gospel, the Gospel of John, which is probably, so if we go chronologically, right, everything Paul probably wrote before 65 AD or CE, however you want to say it. Everything else after that in the New Testament was probably written between 70 and 90, maybe 95 if you push Revelation as far back as possible. But I think you could say everything in the New Testament was penned before 100. So within 70 years of Jesus's death, which is a long time, but not a long time. And so what you have there is Paul. So you have the Gospels that are probably written between, I'd say 70 and 90. John probably at the tail end, Mark probably at the beginning of that. And so you have these Gospels that historically and theologically tell the story of Jesus. And with John is more blatant about his theology, but he's no less, I think, historically interested in making historical points. But John's point, as Origen said, is to tell a spiritual gospel. He's overt about his theology. He's intentionally being theological and philosophical about Jesus, because he's like, you already have the historical stuff. Let me tell you the meaning of why this history matters. What is the significance of this historical stuff? And then you've got the Catholic epistles, James, you've got, which is kind of wisdom literature, so to speak. You have Hebrews, which is what's called an extended homily, but it's highly technical. It's probably the hardest Greek in the New Testament. You have the epistles of John, which are written to churches. You have the book of Revelation, which is an apocalypse within the apocalyptic kind of reality of cosmological dualism, personification of creatures, symbolic meaning, and these principalities and powers, and kind of this. It's the most cinematic book of the Bible, and it's probably the only apocalypse we have in the New Testament outside of what's called mini apocalypses in the Synoptic Gospels, where Jesus kind of goes on an extended apocalyptic kind of discourse, but it's not itself literature apocalyptic. And then I think I've got everything. Then it's Paul. Paul's epistles are written to specific churches, sometimes specific churches, say in Rome or Corinth. But more likely than not, Ephesians is probably the only circular letter that Paul wrote, meaning it didn't have a direct address. It was meant to be circulated amongst a certain geographic region. Are you getting pulled over, dude?
No, there's something happening outside. I live near like kind of a main street, so there's.
Oh, gotcha.
Happening.
No, it's all good. I was just giving you a hard time.
Maybe the SWAT team will like walk down my house and stuff.
But gotcha. Okay. But yeah, so you have basically everything is written either to a community or to select churches. John's called the universal gospel for a reason, because it's meant to be read and seen universally. And so that's kind of how the New Testament kind of broadly is with the different types of literature. There's some issue and debate about the pseudepigraphy, that is often called forgeries, but probably false writings, meaning the person that penned it claims Paul, for example, as the author when Paul didn't write it. I'm not convinced by that per se. I think there's healthy debate about, say, the pastoral epistles not being Pauline. I'm willing to have that conversation. I think it's more likely than not that Paul wrote everything that's attributed to him, even if he didn't himself officially pen everything, because that's not usually how it worked anyway. And so then you have other literature. The Gospels don't claim a specific author. They don't make claims of that. I, John, am writing to you from my desk in Alexandria or wherever. And so that's kind of the broad kind of bit of literature, the literature review of the New Testament. Epistles are generally personalized. Gospels tend to be more kind of 30,000 foot view that don't try to miss the forest for the trees. Apocalypse basically set the trees on fire and go, ooh, pretty, and here's the symbolic meaning of this. And then the Catholic epistles and all that tend to have a more homiletical edge, more of a pastoral kind of function. That's kind of generally speaking. I'm sure I missed one in there, but that's kind of, and James is the same way. It's an extended kind of ethical bit of wisdom literature with a bit of pastoral or homiletical function.